Now, to start, something I find most fascinating about the movie is I have such a hard time describing the story of the film to other people when I'm trying to tell them about the movie. It unfolds in this very organic and natural way where it sort of moves from story point to story point. I'm wondering how you came upon that structure for the film.
یکم سخته برام بگم که چجوری به این رسیدم، چون موقعی که می‌نویسم و کار می‌کنم خودم رو از بیرون نمی‌بینم که چیکار دارم می‌کنم.
It's a little bit difficult for me to explain how I came to this structure because when I'm working I can't see myself from the outside.
ساختاری که برای نوشتن در نظر می‌گیرم شبیه یه بازی دومینوئه که مهره‌ها پشت سر هم چیده میشن، مهره اول میفته و مهره‌های بعدی رو میندازه تا اون مهره آخر میفته.
But the structure I attempt when I begin writing is similar to a dominoes game where the first piece falls and then it causes the next and the next and the next piece to fall.
چیزی که سخت میکنه تعریف کردن داستان رو برای دیگران که اشاره کردیم اینه که شما برای اینکه این داستان به دیگران بگی باید همه این مهره‌ها رو تک تک به دیگران توضیح بدی و این زمان زیادی میبره.
What makes it difficult to talk about is that in order to explain, you would have to explain what each piece represents, and that would take a long time.
But then is there for you a central story, or was there a specific story that you started with when you were writing?
برای من اینجوری بود که با یه خاطره‌ای که از دوستم شنیدم این داستان رو شروع کردم. دوست من سالها پیش به من گفت که میخواد بره و زنی رو که مدتی در یک کشور دیگه باهاش زندگی کرده و ازش جدا شده بود قراره بره تو اون کشور و در سالها و طلاقشون رو رسمی کنن.
I began with an incident that a friend of mine told me about. He told me that he was going to go to another country to formalize his divorce with a woman who he'd been separated from for several years.
بعد فکر کردم که چه موقعیت عجیبیه که یک مردی بره پیش زن سابقش بعد از سالها و چند روزی با هم زیر یه سقف باشن.
And then I thought, what an odd circumstance for a man to go and be under the same roof with a woman from whom he's been separated from for a number of years.
احتمالاً توی این مدتی که این زن و مرد دوباره به هم دیگر می‌بینن بیشترین چیزی که سعی می‌کنن بهش فکر نکنن و راجبش حرف نزنن گذشته مشترکشونه.
Possibly the thing that this man and woman try to most avoid when they come together is discussing what they had as a common past and that's before them.
همیشه وقتی که یه چیزی رو شما سعی می‌کنید که بهش فکر نکنید یا راجبش حرف نزنید اتفاقاً هر چی فرار می‌کنید بیشتر به اون فکر می‌کنید و بیشتر راجبش حرف می‌زنید.
And always when you try to avoid a subject, you tend towards it more and you can't escape speaking about it.
به خاطر همین این داستان برای من جذاب شد و فکر کردم که اون چند روزی رو که این زن و مرد با هم دیگه هستن میتونم تبدیل کنم به یه درام.
And this was why this story was attractive to me and I imagined that I could expand these few days that this man and woman were together and turn it into a drama.
And then what is your writing process like? I guess how do you sort of from that central idea does the story sort of grow and grow?
من اول شروع می‌کنم یه سری چیزایی که به ذهنم میاد و خیلی پراکنده است و گاهی متناقضه به صورت یادداشت‌های پراکنده برای خودم بنویسم.
I begin with a few things that are scattered and I just make scattered notes for myself.
بعد سعی می‌کنم که مثل یه کار ریاضی‌گونه این پازل هایی که به هم وصل میشن رو مثل یه کار کاملا ریاضی پشت سر هم قرار بدم.
And then almost like an arithmetical endeavor, I try to place these incidents in a mathematical way next to each other.
بعد شروع میکنم راه رفتن و موقع راه رفتن یه چیز شروع میکنه به ذهنم میرسه.
And then I walk. And it's when I walk that these things come to my mind.
من این داستان رو توی پاریس توی دفتری می‌نوشتم و خونه‌های قدیمی پاریس و دفترهای قدیمی کفش چوبیه و وقتی راه میری خیلی صدا میده.
I was writing the story in Paris in a house, and old houses in Paris have wood floors, and when you walk they squeak and creak a lot.
وقتی داستان هیجان پیدا میکنه من تندتر یه مسیر رو شاید 1000 بار میرم و برمیگردم توی اون اتاق.
And when there's some excitement in the story, I walk faster back and forth in the same room.
یه روز همسایه طبقه پایین زنگ زد خیلی عصبانی اومد بالا گفت که من واقعا آرامش ندارم بخاطر که خیلی صدا میاد پایین.
One day the neighbor downstairs called and said, honestly, I have no peace because there's so much noise coming from upstairs.
تو اینجا چی کار میکنی که این از سر و صدا ایجاد میشه؟
Said, what do you do up there to make so much noise?
گفتم که من دارم یه فیلمنامه می‌نویسم. گفتم من نویسندم و دارم یه فیلمنامه می‌نویسم.
I said I'm writing a screenplay. I said I'm a writer and I'm writing a screenplay.
گفت خب منم نویسندم و منم فیلمنامه می‌نویسم طبقه پایین ولی من اصلا هیچ صدایی ازم در نمیاد.
Said me too. I'm a screenwriter too and I'm writing a screenplay downstairs but I don't make any noise.
گفتم مطمئن باش فیلمنامه خوبی در حال نوشتن نیستی چون هیچ هیجانی خودتون نگرفته که بتونید ساعت‌ها روی صندلی بشینید و اون داستان رو بنویسید.
I said, well, we can be sure that your story is not going to be very good because there's no excitement in it that's taking hold of you because you're sitting still in a chair the whole time.
بعد ما با هم خیلی دوست شدیم. دو تا فیلمنامه‌نویس که اتفاقی همسایه هم در اومده بود.
Now we became great friends. Two screenwriters that happen to be neighbors.
But now, each segment of the story, the Marie and Ahmad, or Marie and Samir, and then particularly Marie, Samir, and Samir's wife, each one of those pieces could be a whole film of its own. And so how do you sort of find the balance from story to story, and in particular the way you sort of leave the Samir's wife as sort of this final part of the process? How in the writing do you sort of get from A to B to C?
هر کدوم از این شخصیت‌ها یه داستان خودشون رو دارن.
Each of these characters has a story of their own.
و یه جایی این داستان‌ها با هم لینک میشه.
And there is a point at which each of these stories gets linked to the next.
من میدونستم که نقطه آخر این داستان کجاست.
I knew what the final point was of the story.
من سمیر و زنش رو به عنوان نقطه آخر داستان می‌دیدم.
I was seeing Samir and his wife as the final point of the story.
یه کوپلی که رابطه‌شون رابطه شکسته شده‌ایه.
A couple whose relationship was a broken relationship.
اگرچه سمیر باش حرف میزنه ولی انگار که همدیگر رو نمیشنون.
Even though Samir speaks to her, it's as though they don't hear each other.
برگشتم به نقطه شروع فیلم و اونجا هم باز یه زن و شوهری رو دارم که اونها هم با هم حرف میزنن از پشت شیشه‌ای ولی صدای همو نمیشنون.
I went back to the starting point of the film, and there too there was a man and woman that were married and are speaking to each other but through a pane of glass and they can't hear one another.
پس من دو تا زن و شوهر در ابتدا و انتهای فیلم داشتم و داشتم این دو تا رو به هم نزدیک می‌کردم. داستانشون.
Two couples at the beginning and the end of the film, and I was trying to bring the two stories close to each other.
And then, do you write with an initial theme in mind, and you're sort of writing to that theme, or does it emerge for you in the process of writing?
من موقعی که داستان رو می‌نویسم از خودم نمی‌پرسم که این داستان راجع به چیه، چه موضوعی داره و چه تمی داره.
When I write a story, I don't ask myself, what is this about? What is the theme?
توی همه داستان‌های دنیا، همه تم‌های دنیا پنهانه.
In all the stories in the world, all the themes of the world are hidden.
بستگی داره شما چجوری اون رو تعریف می‌کنید و نوع تعریف کردنتونه که یکی از تم‌ها رو برجسته‌تر می‌کنه.
It's a matter of how you tell the story, and it's the way you tell it that will make one theme rather than another stand out.
حتی داستانایی که مادرها شب‌ها برای بچه‌هاشون میگن که بچه‌ها بخوابن، همه تم‌ها توش هست اون داستانای ساده. نوع گفتن داستان توسط مادرهاست که یه تمی رو برای بچه پررنگ‌تر می‌کنه.
Even stories, bedtime stories told by mothers to their children have every theme on earth in them. It's the way that the mother is telling the story that makes one theme stand out.
من توی تعریف کردن این داستان یه نشانه‌های کوچیک خیلی جزئی روزمره میذارم که وقتی اینا رو کنار هم میچینیم تم فیلم مشخص میشه.
In telling the story, I place certain small signposts that when you put them next to one another, then the theme emerges.
مثال میزنم. مثلا توی این فیلم موتیف پاک کردن خیلی تکرار میشه.
As an example, in this film, for instance, the motif of wiping and cleaning appears frequently.
مثل باران که انگار میاد که یه چیزی رو پاک کنه.
Like rain that comes down as though to clean, wash things clean.
مثل برف پاکنی که انگار یه چیزی رو میخواد پاک کنه.
Like the windshield wipers that are cleaning off the windshield.
مثل رنگی که توی خونه دیوارها رنگ قبلی دیوارها رو میخواد پنهان کنه.
Like the paint that in the house seems to want to cover the previous layer of color on the walls.
مثل شغل خوشرویی که انگار یه چیزهایی رو میشوره و پاک میکنه از رو لباسها.
Like the profession of having a laundry service that wants to clean and take things off.
همه اینا در کنار هم انگار به ما میگه که یه چیزی هست که آدما میخوان پاکش کنن.
All of these put next to each other seem to tell us there's perhaps something that human beings want to erase.
و این هاست که تم فیلم رو برجسته میکنه.
And these are things that make the theme stand out.
So for you, is writing a process of its own and then sort of directing and making the film a separate secondary process, or do you see it as one fluid process?
من فکر کنم که همزمان برای من که خودم فیلمنامه‌مو می‌نویسم همزمان اینا اتفاق میفته.
I think that for myself, I who am writing the story, all of it happens at once.
موقعی که دارم می‌نویسم چون میدونم خودم قراره کارگردانی کنم یه جوری شکل کارگردانی هم توی فیلمنامه‌ام رعایت میشه.
When I'm writing, because I'm aware that I myself will be directing, the directing is somehow respected in the process of writing.
به همین دلیل فیلمنامه‌هایی که می‌نویسم خیلی صفحاتش زیاده و خیلی فیلمنامه‌های طولانیه. همه چیز رو می‌نویسم توش.
Which is why the screenplays I write are quite long, many pages, and contain everything.
As I understand it, when you begin working with your actors, you like to rehearse them for as long as you can. And are you still rewriting the script based off of what you're getting from those rehearsals?
نه موقعی که فیلمنامه در واقع تمرین میکنم بر اساس تمرینات خیلی چیزی توی فیلمنامه تغییر نمیکنه چون این فیلمنامه یه جوری همه چیز با هم مثل پازل وصل شده اگه یه چیزی رو تغییر بدم همه اون ساختمان فرو میریزه.
No, in the process of rehearsal, I don't change anything really because the screenplay is completed. And if I were to change one thing, all the pieces have been connected logically. And if I were to change something, the whole thing would fall apart.
ولی این کار رو سخت میکنه وقتی شما یه فیلمنامه کامل دارید و میدید به هنرپیشه‌ها که اجرا کنن اونا احساس میکنن که خودشون توی خلق این شخصیت در واقع تأثیری نداشتن.
But this makes things difficult because when you have a completed screenplay and give it to an actor, they tend to feel that they have had no part in the creation of the character.
اونا احساس کنن آزادی کامل ندارند.
They feel they don't have absolute freedom.
من توی تمرین ها در واقع کاری که میکنم اینه که دوباره از نقطه صفر با اونا شروع میکنم همون جایی که خودم شروع کردم برای ساختن شخصیت و این مسیر رو که برای ساختن شخصیت طی کردم یه بار با اونا طی میکنم در چند ماه.
What I do in the rehearsals is that I start at zero again and I tread the path that I trod alone once more with the actors.
و بعد از چند ماه اونا احساس میکنن که این شخصیت رو خودشون ساختن و دیگه کسی بهشون تحمیل نکرد.
And after a few months they begin to feel that they themselves created the character, not that it was imposed on them by someone else.
And I spoke to the actress Berenice Bejo, and she told me how she was really surprised how in the rehearsal process you were just asking her questions and she was telling you what she thought of the character, what she thought the character might do in given situations. And I'm curious, are there right or wrong answers she would give to you in that situation?
اصلا مهم نبود که جواب اون چیزیه که من فکر میکنم یا نه.
Didn't didn't matter at all whether her answer was going to be something I had thought or not.
اون فقط باید به این باور و به این احساس میرسید که شریک توی این شخصیت، نظرش توی شکل‌گیری این شخصیت تأثیر داره.
All that mattered was for her to believe that she was a partner in the creation of this character, that her opinions mattered in who the character was going to be.
من دوست نداشتم بگم این کاراکتر اینه و تو باید اینو بازی کنی. اون باید فکر می‌کرد که در واقع ازش یه سری سوالا شده و بر اساس پاسخ‌های اون شخصیت شکل گرفته.
It didn't matter what she said, I just had to receive the answers from her so that she believed that she had played a part in the formation of this character.
I know the character of Marie is so complicated, and she often does things that as a viewer of the film you can understand why she did them, but you may not agree with it, you may not like it. And I'm curious, for you, was it difficult to be sure that the audience sort of stayed with her character, that you never sort of lost the audience from the character?
این یه اشتباهیه که خیلی از فیلم‌ها دارن که فکر می‌کنن ممکنه اگر وضعیت پیچیده‌تر بشه یا کاراکتر پیچیده‌تر بشه تماشاگر اون کاراکتر رو ازش فاصله بگیره و نفهمتش.
This is an error that exists in a lot of films where there's this misconception that if the character gets more and more complicated, the audience will move further and further away from that character.
اتفاقاً تماشاگرها دوست دارن پیچیدگی رو دوست دارن.
Actually, audiences like complication.
این یک کلیشه و یه اشتباهی که فکر می‌کنیم که باید همه چیز رو خیلی واضح و روشن بگیم که تماشاگر بتونه فیلم رو دنبال بکنه.
It's a mistake and a misconception to think that one has to state everything clearly and very simply for the audience to be able to follow the character.
و این چیزیه که سینمای آمریکا رو روز به روز هی داره سقوط میده، هی داره تنزل میده از جایگاه دوران کلاسیکی داشته.
And this is what is making American cinema come down from its position in the classic golden period.
چون اونا احساس میکنن که تماشاگر باهوش نیست.
Because there's this misapprehension that the audience is not smart.
من فکر کنم که نباید ترسید از این. هر چقدر پیچیده تر باشه، اگر پیچیدگی درست طراحی بشه، تماشاگر همراهی میکنه.
I think one should not be afraid of that. The more complex a character is, if the complexity is approached correctly, the audience is going to be more absorbed.
یه چیزی که من توی این فیلم تجربه کردم اینه که ما همیشه فکر می‌کنیم که آدم‌ها اول فکر می‌کنن بعد یه کاری رو می‌کنن.
One thing I experienced in this film is that we always imagine that people first think and then they do something.
ولی توی این سن متوجه شدم که آدم‌ها غالباً یه کاری رو می‌کنن و بعد فکر می‌کنن که چرا اون کارو کردن.
But at this age I've come to realize that people often do something and then ponder why it is they did it.
چیزی که ماری توی این فیلم داره، ماری یه کارایی می‌کنه و بعد که انجامش داد فکر می‌کنه که چرا من اون کارو کردم.
Which is true of Marie in this film. She takes certain actions and then wonders why is it that I did them.
این باعث پیچیدگی شخصیت‌ها میشه.
This is the kind of thing that makes the characters more complex.
Actually, that brings up something I don't think I've ever heard you speak about, which is as you made a transition from working in theater to working more in cinema, did you have any specific influences as far as filmmaking, whether they were American filmmakers, Iranian filmmakers, European filmmakers, who maybe were you looking to as you were making that transition to cinema?
من بیشتر در واقع تأثیرم رو از نمایشنامه‌نویسای خوب دنیا گرفتم.
My greatest influences were the great playwrights.
از کسایی مثل ویلیامز، ایبسن، چوخوف.
People like Williams, Ibsen, Chekhov.
همیشه فکر می‌کردم که برای همه عمرم تئاتر کار می‌کنم.
And I'd always imagined that my life long I would work in the theater.
و خیلی اتفاقی از من خواسته شد برم رادیو نمایشنامه بنویسم و بعد خواسته شد برم تلویزیون و بعد توی تلویزیون که کار کردم یکی از اون خواست که بیام سینما.
And it was really by accident that I was asked to work in the radio and then in television, and when I was working in television someone asked me to work.
حتی فیلم اولم که می‌ساختم فکر کردم که برمیگردم به تئاتر.
And even when I was making my first film I was thinking I'm going to go back to the theater.
ولی تو سینماگری که خیلی تأثیر گرفتم ازش کوروساوا بود.
But in cinema the filmmaker who most influenced me is Kurosawa.
فیلم راشومان کوروساوا رو اگر ببینیم یه چیزی شبیه هم قصه‌ایه که من تو فیلمام دارم.
If you were to see Rashomon, Kurosawa's film, in some way it resembles these stories that are in my films.
اونم یه اتفاقی توی اون فیلم افتاده که هر دفعه از یه زاویه اون اتفاق تعریف میشه.
In that too, there's an event that's occurred, and each time it's retold from a different perspective.
فیلمساز دیگه‌ای که توی نوشتن رو من تأثیر گذاشت و نوع در واقع همه حوادث مثل یه دومینو میره جلو بیلی وایلدر.
The other filmmaker who's influenced me a great deal, where the incidents in the story proceed like a game, is Billy Wilder.
یا برگمن که خیلی به آدم‌ها نزدیک میشه و رابطه آدم‌ها براش مهمه.
Or Bergman, who explores closely his characters and their relationships matters to him a great deal.
و کیشلوفسکی که شخصیت‌های فیلماشو همه رو به نظر میاد که دوستشون داره.
And Kieslowski, who seems to really love all the characters in his film.
و فیلمسازای خیلی خوب ایرانی که شما متأسفانه شاید نشناسید فیلماشون رو و اونا بزرگترین تأثیر رو روی من گذاشتن.
And some great Iranian filmmakers whose works you may not know, who had probably the greatest influence on me.
And before we take some questions from the audience, the last thing I want to ask you is simply, you get such fantastic performances from children in a number of your films, and in A Separation you worked with your own daughter. That seems a little like cheating. And I'm curious here, in particular with the young boy who plays Fuad, like, is there a trick to getting such good performances out of young actors?
من هر دفعه که با بچه‌ها کار می‌کنم با خودم میگم که این آخرین باریه که باشون کار می‌کنم چون خیلی کار کردم باشون سخته.
Every time I work with children, I say to myself, this is the last time I'll ever work with children. This is a very difficult thing.
ولی وقتی فیلم آماده میشه فکر کنم که واقعا بدون بچه‌ها نمیتونم فیلم بسازم.
But when the film's completed, I say to myself, truly I can't ever make a film without children.
بچه‌ها وقتی که میان توی فیلم دو تا چیز با خودشون میارن.
When children come into a film, they bring with themselves two things.
برای این نوع فیلم‌ها که فضای سخت و یکم تلخ داره حضور بچه‌ها فضای عاطفی فیلم رو یکم ملایم‌تر می‌کنه.
For such films that have a difficult and complicated environment, the presence of children makes the emotional space a little softer.
و دومین چیزی که با خودشون توی فیلم میارن توی فضایی که بزرگتر و پر از رابطه‌هاشون پر از سوء تفاهمه و گاهی دروغه اونا با خودشون استعدادن.
The second thing that they bring into an environment where the adult relationships are full of conflict is they bring a certain degree of sincerity into it.
راهی که برای کار کردن با بچه‌ها وجود داره و فیلمی که وجود داره شما باید بکنید که یک زمان نامحدود دارید و صبر نیاز داره کار کردن.
In terms of the way of working with children, what is required is to imagine that you have an endless amount of time. You need a lot of patience.
بچه‌ها نیاز دارن که خیلی به آرامی و پله به پله به شخصیت درک بشن.
The children need to approach the character very gradually, step by step.
And we've got some time for some questions from the audience. Right there. Go ahead.
The set decoration in the film seems very claustrophobic and created to allow the camera to have a lot of close-ups. Can you talk about the process for set decoration?
And the question has to do with the set decoration of the film and how it sort of fed into the feeling of claustrophobia.
صحنه این فیلم همون کسیه که فیلم بهروز و آبی سفید کیشلوفسکی بود.
The production designer on this film is the person that worked on the white films of Kieslowski.
و ما با هم وقتی صحبت کردیم قرار شد که فضای خونه ها و لوکیشن ها یه جوری انعکاسی باشه از درون آدم ها.
And when we spoke with each other, we decided that the atmosphere of the interiors would reflect the internal atmosphere of these characters.
همون پیچیدگی که درون آدم ها و به هم ریختگی و شلوغی و آشفتگی که درون آدم ها وجود داره قرار شد که توی فضایی که آدم ها درش زندگی میکنن هم دیده بشه.
The disorder, the chaos, the complexity that the characters are experiencing internally was to be observed in the atmosphere of the spaces.
مثلا معماری این خونه خیلی معماری پیچیده‌ایه، یعنی یه راه‌های عجیب غریبی داره. اگرچه به نظر واقعی میاد ولی زندگی تو این خونه خیلی سخته.
For instance, the architecture of this house is very jumbled. There are a lot of corners and turns, and even though it looks okay, living in it is quite difficult.
And it's interesting, the posters for Red, White, and Blue are hanging on this very theater. They're outside the building. Yeah. And we've got a question right here in the front.
I'm sort of amazed at how you accomplish all this. As I understand, you don't speak French. And so it's sort of mind-boggling, the complexity of accomplishing all this through, I guess, translators?
And the question has to do with you do not speak French, and so what is the process like working with your actors when they're in a, acting in a language you don't speak?
من فرانسه نمیدونم. الان یکم وقتی حرف میزنن میفهمم، ولی اون موقع که کار میکردم من فرانسه نمیدونستم.
I don't know French. Now, when French is spoken, I understand a little, but when I was working on this film, I didn't speak French.
و این بزرگترین چالشی بود که برای این فیلم وجود داشت.
And this was the greatest challenge that I had when making this film.
و خیلی‌ها به من گفتن که این کار خطرناکیه و نباید بعد از جدایی و موفقیتش برید و این ریسک رو بکنید.
And many people advised me against such an undertaking after the success of a separation.
ولی من با خودم گفتم که بعد از جدایی اتفاقا من باید برم یک کار خطرناک بکنم. اگر دوباره همون کاری که نتیجه داده رو بکنم، یه جور به خودم دروغ گفتم.
But what I said to myself was that after a separation, I had to do something that was a major risk. That if I just did something that I knew I was able to, I was lying to myself in a way.
من به خاطر این فیلم 2 سال رفتم و پاریس زندگی کردم با خانواده‌ام.
To make this film, I went to Paris and lived there with my family for 2 years.
ساعت‌های زیادی توی مترو خیابونا راه می‌رفتم و سعی می‌کردم صدای اونا رو و ملودی زبانشون رو بشنوم.
I would walk endless hours on the streets and in the metro and just listen to the melody of the language.
بعد فهمیدم که برخلاف اون چیزی که همه ما فکر کنیم که ماها از طریق زبان با هم دیگه ارتباط برقرار می‌کنیم، این نیست. ما از طریق نگاهمون و میمیکمون و انرژی که رد و بدل می‌کنیم ارتباط برقرار می‌کنیم.
And then I realized that contrary to what we often think, that it's through language that we establish contact with each other, we actually connect through the gaze and through gestures and through non-language signs.
من چند تا مترجم داشتم که اینا خیلی کمک می‌کردن و نه تنها تبدیل شده بودن به صدای من و عین حرفای من رو ترجمه می‌کردن، حتی رفتارها و حرکت‌های دست من و چیزای دیگه هم انجام میدادن این ترجمه.
I had several interpreters who not only helped me in conveying the words I spoke, but who even mimicked my gestures and my movements.
یکشون به من گفت که از موقعی که مترجم شما شدم سیگار زیاد میکشم.
One of them told me, ever since I've become your interpreter, I smoke a lot of cigarettes.
گفتم چرا؟ گفت به خاطر اینکه شما وقتی دارین توضیح میدین میرین یه سیگار برمی‌دارین و منم چون دارم ترجمه میکنم میرم باز منم یه سیگار برمی‌دارم و مثل شما سیگار میکشم.
And I said, why? And he said, because when you're giving an explanation, you walk over and pick up a cigarette, and I walk over and do the same thing.
We've got time for just a couple more. Yep, got one right down the aisle.
To get back to talking about children, it seems to me that the children are the real victims, the collateral damage in this film, even the unborn baby. Could you speak a little bit about that?
And the question has to do with the children in the story in some ways being the real victims of what's going on.
بچه‌ها کمترین سهم رو و مسئولیت رو توی اتفاقایی که پیش از این رخ داده دارن.
The children have the least share and the smallest part in everything that has occurred before.
ولی بیشترین آسیب رو از اتفاقایی که پیش از این توسط بزرگتر رخ داده می‌بینن.
But they sustain the greatest damage from the events that have occurred through the adults in this film in the past.
چرا اونو بیشترین آسیب رو می‌بینن؟ به خاطر اینکه نمی‌دونن اصلا چه اتفاقی داره میفته و فقط تبعات اون اتفاق رو می‌بینن.
Why do they suffer the most? Because they don't understand why the events occur and they only suffer its consequences.
شما یه موقع است که یه سری آسیبایی میبینید ولی میدونید که چرا دارید این آسیبا رو میبینید و به خاطر از چه چیزی این آسیبا نشأت میگیره و سرچشمه میگیره.
Sometimes you may suffer hurts of various kinds, but you understand where they stem from and why it is that they've occurred.
این یه خود موقعیت رو براتون قابل تحمل تر میکنه.
This may make things somewhat more tolerable.
ولی به بچه‌ها توضیح داده نمیشه که چه خبره، فقط اونا آسیب‌ها رو میبینن.
But the children are not offered any explanation of what's going on. They just see the damage.
تو این فیلم یه بچه‌ای هست که ما هیچ موقع نمیبینیمش ولی مرتب داره آسیب میبینه. مامانش مرتب داره سیگار میکشه، حتی ضربه بهش میزنه.
There's a child in this film we never see, but it's constantly suffering the damages because the mother is smoking and even hits herself once.
این شروع آسیب دیدن اون بچه است.
This is the start of that child being damaged.
And we've got time for just one more. Oh, yep, towards back there.
Yes. Did you want to show mental illness in this film? Did you want to address mental illness? Was Ahmed was he depressed?
And the question has to do with whether you were depicting mental illness either in Marie or in Ahmed.
And one more question. How much did this film cost you? and then with the sounds, I enjoyed the sounds.
Mental depression.
یه وقتی که راجع به شخصیت پردازی صحبت میکنیم حتما راجع به مسائل روحی روانی کاراکترها هم حرف میزنیم.
When we talk about characterization, necessarily we're also addressing the psychological state of the character.
احمد به نظر میاد که یه دوره افسردگی رو پشت سر گذاشته و هنوز یه نشانه‌ای از اون افسردگی درش دیده میشه.
It seems that Ahmad has gone through a period of depression and that perhaps some remnants of that still exist.
آدم‌هایی که خیلی به پشت سرشون نگاه میکنن و خیلی به گذشتهشون فکر میکنن بیشتر افسرده میشن.
Characters who look back towards their past a great deal tend to suffer depression more.
ماری خیلی اضطراب داره و همیشه بیقراره.
Marie appears very anxious and is always restless.
آدمایی که زیاد به آینده فکر میکنن و نگران آینده‌ان بیشتر مضطربن.
And individuals who tend to look to the future more tend to be more anxious.
این یه بخشی از شخصیت پردازی اونها بود.
These were aspects of creating those characters.
قیمتی که برای ساخت فیلم در واقع به من گفتن فکر میکنم چیزی حدود 8 میلیون یورو بود.
The cost of the film, at least what I was told, was something around 8 million.
It's not
Euros.
It's nothing.
Euros.
میکس صدای استودیو بود و صدای سر صحنه.
The sounds were a mix of on-set and studio sounds.
And that's where we're going to have to wrap it up. Thank you all for staying late. And thank you to Asghar Farhadi. And thank you to our interpreter.